She's in bed, phone screen lit up, watching a video about something called the anti-budget. Someone is explaining it very carefully. You take your savings off the top, automate the transfer, and then spend whatever's left without tracking a single dollar. No categories, no spreadsheets, no guilt. Dana has heard this before. Not this exact version, but close enough. She's watched the zero-based budget explanation, the one where you assign every dollar a job before the month starts. She's watched the envelope method, which she tried for 11 days before she ran out of envelopes and couldn't find more and decided to restart in September. She's watched the 50-30-20 breakdown and pay yourself first, and the guy who swears by a single checking account with mental accounting, and the woman who uses 5 accounts and color-coded labels in her banking app. It's 47 videos, not a rough estimate. The actual number in her watch history. And Dana still doesn't have a budget. She's not careless with money. She worries about money constantly, in the car, in meetings, at 1 in the morning instead of sleeping. She makes $61,000 a year, which sounds like enough until it isn't. She knows intellectually that she should track her spending. She's downloaded 3 apps to do exactly that. She knows about YNAB, she knows about Mint. She knows what compounding interest does to a $4,000 credit card balance when you only pay minimums. She has a tab open right now with a compound interest calculator. She has not put any actual numbers into it. She watches the anti-budget video all the way through. It makes sense. It feels clean. She thinks, I could actually do this one. She doesn't open her banking app. She closes the video and opens another one. If you've been Dana, not the specific person, but that specific night, there's a name for what your brain was doing. It's called the perfect system fallacy, and it is, in a very precise neurological sense, why you've been getting a dopamine reward for not making financial progress. Let's start with what your brain actually does when Dana finds that anti-budget video at 1 in the morning. This is not a metaphor. This is a literal description of what happens in the reward circuitry of the human brain. There's a neuroscientist named Wolfram Schultz at the University of Cambridge who spent decades studying dopaminergic neurons, the cells that release dopamine, in primates and humans. What he found rewrote what most people think they understand about dopamine. The popular version of dopamine is you do something good, your brain releases dopamine, you feel pleasure, you want to do it again. Reward follows action. Simple circuit. Schultz found something different. Dopamine neurons don't fire when you get the reward. They fire when you encounter something that reliably predicts a future reward. Something that signals that a reward is coming. And here's the precise part that matters. The size of the dopamine release is proportional to how unexpected that prediction is. How much better it is than what you were expecting a moment ago. This is called reward prediction error. The error isn't a mistake. It's the gap between what you expected and what you got. A large positive gap, you expected nothing, you got a signal that something good is coming, produces a large dopamine spike. A zero gap, you expected exactly what happened, produces almost no dopamine response at all. A negative gap, you expected something good and got something bad, produces active suppression. Your dopamine neurons go below baseline. Now, Dana at 1 in the morning finds the anti-budget video. 1 minute earlier, she was watching cat videos or doom scrolling. She was not expecting a financial insight. The anti-budget concept appears. It is novel. It promises resolution of her largest source of daily stress. It promises her a future where she is not anxious about money, where she is the kind of person who has savings, where she has control. Her brain doesn't wait to see if it works. Her brain does not require evidence. Her brain detects. This signal reliably predicts a future reward. And because the signal was completely unexpected a moment ago, the prediction error is enormous. The dopamine spike is large. She feels something that is functionally indistinguishable from, this is the answer. And that feeling is not lying to her exactly. That feeling is telling her accurate information about her neurochemistry. It's just that her neurochemistry is responding to the discovery, not the execution. Here's where the math breaks. The next day, Dana would need to open her banking app and look at her actual transactions from last month. Not plan a budget, not download a template. Look at what she actually spent. The night Dana finds the anti-budget video, her dopamine system fires hard. Novel signal, enormous prediction error. The next morning, when she needs to open her actual banking app and look at last month's transactions, the prediction error is approximately 0. She's seen numbers before. She knows roughly what's there. And if the number is worse than she expected, that's not 0. That's negative. That's her brain actively suppressing the signal. So the neurochemical math isn't complicated. Research feels like progress because it fires the same circuits as progress. Execution feels like nothing or worse than nothing because it does. Her brain is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed to. It was designed by millions of years of evolution to pursue novel, high-value signals and to conserve energy on tasks that provide no new information. The problem is that this design was built for an environment where the most important skills were detecting new opportunities. A water source, an animal trail, a rival camp. Not for an environment where the most important skill is executing the same boring data entry task every week for years. Dana's brain is perfectly adapted for 50,000 BCE. It is spectacularly poorly adapted for personal finance in 2025, and she's not alone in this. 83.1% of Americans say they follow a budget, strictly or loosely. 68.4% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Both numbers come from 2025 data. Both are true simultaneously. 8 out of 10 people have a system. 7 out of 10 are one unexpected expense away from financial collapse. The problem is not that people don't have systems. The problem is what having a system does to the brain. There's a psychologist named Roy Baumeister who ran a series of experiments that revealed something that sounds at first like good news, and then turns into the most precise description of what traps you. The background. Baumeister had been studying what's sometimes called the Zeigarnik effect, the phenomenon where incomplete tasks stay active in your working memory, generating intrusive thoughts, pulling at your attention. If you've ever had a work email you needed to send follow-up on, and you kept thinking about it randomly throughout the day, even when you were trying to do other things, that's the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain doesn't like open loops. Financial anxiety works this way too. For someone in Dana's position, the open loop of "my finances are a mess" runs constantly in the background. It surfaces in the grocery store when she's deciding whether to buy the expensive olive oil. It surfaces at happy hour when someone suggests a nicer restaurant. It surfaces at 1 in the morning instead of sleep. This background noise is cognitively expensive. It consumes working memory. It degrades executive function. It is, in the literal sense, making it harder to think clearly about other things. Baumeister's insight, which he documented with his colleague E.J. Masicampo, was this. The brain has a shortcut for closing these loops. And the shortcut does not require actually solving the problem. It requires making a plan. In their experiments, they found that when participants were reminded of an important, unfinished task, one that was generating intrusive thoughts, those thoughts disappeared when participants were allowed to make a concrete plan for how and when they would complete it. Not when they completed it, when they planned to. The brain registers a sufficiently concrete plan as, this problem has been handled. Close the loop. The anxiety dissipates. The working memory frees up. On the surface, this sounds useful. Plans are good. Intentions are good. Implementation intentions. The specific when, where, how of what you'll do are genuinely associated with higher rates of follow-through in the research. The problem Baumeister found was subtler. The relief arrives before the action. The loop closes before anything changes in the real world. And the anxiety, the discomfort, that was driving the person toward action, it's gone. The pressure that was pushing them to do something difficult has been vented through the act of planning. Dana downloads the YNAB app and spends 40 minutes setting up her categories. Income from salary, income from freelance, rent, utilities, groceries, dining out, transport, subscriptions, personal care. She creates the categories carefully. She reads the documentation. She watches the onboarding video. She thinks, this is the one that's going to work. She closes the app. She doesn't feel the pull to open her actual bank statements right now because the open loop, the financial anxiety that was the engine driving her toward action, has been closed. The plan exists. The brain has logged, handled. The plan does not execute itself. Dana would argue with the next part. Most people do. She doesn't think of herself as trying to become a certain type of person. She thinks she's trying to get her finances under control. But watch what she actually collects. The YNAB subscription, the color-coded spreadsheet, the conversation with a friend that starts, "I've been really trying to get serious." None of these are outcomes, they're symbols. And Peter Gollwitzer at NYU spent years documenting what symbols do to the pressure to achieve the actual goal. They reduce it. The symbol partially fulfills the identity need. The urgency to do something difficult decreases in direct proportion to how many symbols have been gathered. In Gollwitzer's experiments, he found that when people who were working toward an identity goal received social recognition for their progress, even recognition of their intentions, not their results, they subsequently put in less effort toward the actual goal. The symbol had partially fulfilled the identity need. The pressure to continue was reduced. The symbol of financial responsibility for someone in Dana's position is not a paid-off credit card or a funded emergency account. It's the 47 videos in the watch history which constitute a kind of curriculum, and completing a curriculum makes you educated. And being educated about budgeting is part of the identity of someone who is financially responsible. The brain collects these symbols and updates its internal ledger. I am becoming that person. The gap between who I am and who I want to be is smaller than it was. The urgency to do something difficult, to actually sit with uncomfortable numbers, to say no to things, to tolerate the sensation of denial, decreases in proportion to how many symbols have been collected. This is not weakness. This is not lack of discipline. This is a fundamental feature of how identity-based motivation works in human beings. The mechanism that is supposed to drive you towards your goal is using your research activity as evidence that the goal is being achieved. Let's put a number on how common this is. The app abandonment rate for mobile applications is 25% after a single session. 1 in 4 users downloads a financial app, opens it once, and never opens it again. Not because the app doesn't work, not because they got what they needed, because the peak experience of the app, the setup, the categories, the sense of possibility, happened during the first session. Everything after that session is maintenance. And maintenance neurologically looks like a prediction error of 0. There's also this. More than 50% of people in every age group say that unexpected expenses are what destroy their budget attempts. Not lack of willpower, not poor planning. An unexpected expense lands, it exceeds the budget category, and the app reports a failure. The system designed to help them has now generated a negative prediction error. The dopamine system suppresses. The emotional response is, the system doesn't work for my life. So the person deletes the app, and then within some number of days or weeks, finds another video about a system. Because the alternative, living without a system, without the plan, without the symbolic progress, reopens the anxiety loop. And the anxiety loop is worse than the dopamine of searching for a new solution. This is the cycle. Not a bad habit, not a character flaw, a closed neurochemical loop with no natural exit. The loop is almost perfectly self-sealing. This is why. Researchers at UC Berkeley found that the brain processes new information through the same reward circuitry that processes food, money, and addictive substances. Information that is novel and relevant to survival, which financial information is because financial stress is existential stress, is coded as reward in the same neural currency as an actual resource. Which means that watching the video about the anti-budget activates the same reward circuitry as finding actual resources. The brain doesn't cleanly separate "I learned about money" from "I made progress with money." The distinction your conscious mind makes. I've only learned about this. I haven't done it. Your dopamine system doesn't make. The research, the planning, the preparation, It all counts as progress in the part of your brain that matters for motivation. And once something counts as progress, the urgency to make more progress decreases. The brain is not wrong that learning about finances is related to financial security. It's wrong about the conversion rate. 47 videos, 47 units of discovery dopamine. Almost none of that translates into a lower credit card balance. Now consider what happens when someone like James tries to fight this directly. James is 34. He's been through the app cycle 3 times. He recognizes the pattern. He decides he's going to be smarter about it. He's not going to download the fancy app. He's not going to watch the videos. He's going to build his own system in Excel. From scratch, a real system, not someone else's template. He spends a weekend on it. He builds a dashboard with conditional formatting. The cells turn red when a category is over budget and green when it's under. He builds a summary tab. He builds a monthly overview with averages calculated automatically. He adds a net worth tracker. He does not look at his bank statements during this process. He is building the infrastructure for looking at bank statements. He will look at the bank statements once the infrastructure is ready. The spreadsheet takes the whole weekend. It is genuinely impressive. He sends a screenshot to a friend. James has not engaged with his actual finances. He has engaged with a model of his finances. The model is beautiful. The model has no data in it. This is a phenomenon called precrastination, and it's almost the opposite of what the word sounds like. Procrastination is avoiding a task by not starting. Precrastination is completing a subtask, even an unnecessarily difficult one, specifically to get the sensation of progress, and specifically to discharge the cognitive pressure created by the larger task. James built a weekend-long system so he could feel like he had handled the thing. He did something hard. He has something to show for it. The cognitive pressure, the open loop, and is closed. The relief is genuine. The actual task remains untouched. The spreadsheet sits empty. He'll fill it in next weekend when he has more time to do it properly. The average American household spent $77,158 in 2024. That's up 44% from 2014. 44% in 10 years. Dana makes $61,000 a year. James makes $68,000. Neither of them is anywhere near $77,000 in annual expenses. They can't be. They don't earn that. Which means they're not in the median household. They're below it. Which means the gap between what the system expects to spend and what they have to spend has been widening for a decade. And it will continue widening, and no budgeting method changes the fundamental math of income versus the cost of living. This is not an excuse, it's context. The search for the perfect budgeting system is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening in a specific economic moment where a large portion of the population at the $35,000 to $85,000 income level is attempting to use personal finance tools designed for people with margin. Designed for people who have enough that the question is how to allocate it, not whether enough exists at all. When the system breaks, when the unexpected car repair exceeds the car category by $800 and the app says you failed, the failure is not always the user's failure. Sometimes the system is genuinely wrong for the situation. The Mint user who spent 45 minutes setting up perfect budget categories and was then told he was $4,200 over budget in a month when he earned $0 because he was freelance and the app assumed a fixed salary. That's not a failure of discipline. That's an architectural mismatch between the tool and the reality. But here's what the neurochemistry does with that information. When the system fails, the brain doesn't think. This particular system was wrong for my situation. The brain experiences a negative prediction error. I expected the system to work, it didn't. And the emotional signal is, this approach doesn't work. And then, because the anxiety has returned and the dopamine of research is available, the brain steers toward, let me find a better system. This is the part that's almost elegant in a terrible way. The failure of the old system is the trigger for the dopamine of searching for the new one. The loop feeds itself. The more times the system fails, the more times the search restarts, the more the search and discover reward gets reinforced. Dana isn't watching her 47th video despite having watched 46 others. She's watching her 47th video partly because she watched 46 others. Each previous disappointment has taught her brain that what comes next is the relief of a new discovery. There's a detail in the Vanguard retirement research that cuts to something specific. A study of 800,000 employees with access to company 401k plans found that when workers had two fund options to choose from, about 75% participated in the retirement plan. When the options expanded to 59 funds, participation dropped to 60%. Every 10 additional fund options reduced participation by approximately 2%. More choice, less action. Not because people don't care about their retirement, because the cognitive cost of making the wrong choice increases with every option added. And when the cost of choosing wrongly feels high enough, the brain stalls on the decision. Not deciding becomes preferable to deciding incorrectly. James faced the same architecture when he built his spreadsheet. Not two options or 59. He gave himself infinite options by designing the system himself. And infinite options produce the same result as 59. No entry in any cell. In the personal finance content ecosystem, the equivalent is 47 videos each making a slightly different case for a slightly different method. Zero-based budgeting has research behind it. So does pay yourself first. The envelope method has community success stories. The anti-budget has a compelling psychological logic. Each of them represents a valid fund option. Each of them represents the possibility of choosing the wrong one. The safest cognitive move, the one that defers the risk of being wrong, is to keep researching, to watch the 48th video. This is analysis paralysis, and it doesn't come from an unwillingness to commit. It comes from the same loss aversion that makes people freeze on investment decisions. The asymmetry between getting it right and getting it wrong feels enormous. The system you choose is the system you're trusting your financial future to. That's too large a weight to place on an imperfect decision made at 1 in the morning. So the decision doesn't get made. The research continues. Marcus is 29. He found a video about zero-based budgeting 6 months ago and felt the certainty Dana felt watching the anti-budget. He commented on the video, "Starting this on the 1st. Let's go." He has not maintained a zero-based budget for 6 months. In Peter Gollwitzer's experiments on symbolic self-completion, one of the consistent findings was that public declaration of an intention toward an identity goal produces the same partial fulfillment as actually taking a step toward the goal, and sometimes more. The social recognition, the likes, the replies, the friend who says, "Good for you," that recognition tells the brain, you are the person who does this thing. The identity gap has narrowed. Marcus left a comment saying he was going to start a zero-based budget, and strangers on the internet affirmed him, and his brain registered that as a unit of progress toward becoming a financially responsible person. He didn't start the budget on the 1st. He genuinely felt, less urgency about starting it. Not because he decided not to, because the comment had partially discharged the pressure. This is not a social media problem. It's not about phones or dopamine addiction in the colloquial sense. It's a feature of how identity-directed motivation works in social animals. Humans have always navigated identity through social recognition. The way the tribe perceived you was not separate from who you were. The mechanism Gollwitzer identified is not new. It just has new channels. The comment section under a budgeting video is, neurologically, a way of telling your tribe, I am becoming the kind of person who does this thing. And if they believe you, the biological pressure to prove it decreases. One more piece that doesn't fit the tidy narrative. There's one more piece of research that explains why none of this is a conscious choice. Researchers at Berkeley showed participants subliminal money images, flashed too fast to register, and found that people physically gripped harder in response to financial stimuli they never consciously saw. Dana's avoidance of her banking app isn't a decision she's making. It's a physical response to a stimulus her prefrontal cortex doesn't even get a vote on. The rational prefrontal cortex, the part that can understand the logic of zero-based budgeting and know intellectually that it would work, is not running the show when it comes to financial behavior. The subcortical systems are running the show, and they are responding to stimuli, triggers, histories, emotional associations that are largely invisible to the person experiencing them. This is why a perfect system, one that is logically airtight, well-researched, designed by behavioral economists, optimized for the human brain, still collapses when someone gets to week 3 and has a bad week. The bad week is a negative prediction error. The subcortical systems register, this path leads to pain. The conscious mind says, I just need to stick with it. The subcortical systems, which are older and faster and carry more evolutionary weight, tend to win. The system was never the variable. The system was always the occasion for either reward or punishment, and the brain was always going to respond to those chemicals, not to the system's logical elegance. The mechanism explains the sequence. It doesn't excuse the outcome. Baumeister's research, in its full version, found that implementation intentions, the specific when, where, how commitments, do produce better follow-through. The problem is never the plan. It's when the plan arrives instead of the action, rather than before it. What Gollwitzer's research found in total was that private goals are often more durable than public ones, not because secrecy is virtuous, but because public recognition doesn't prematurely close the identity gap. The method of pursuing an identity goal matters as much as the goal itself. What the neuroscience of prediction errors actually implies is not that novelty is the enemy. It's that novelty has already been cached. The dopamine spike from finding a system does not carry forward into implementation. The implementation needs its own reward structure, which means the first entry into the spreadsheet, the first honest look at 3 months of transactions, cannot be treated as a chore to get through on the way to the real work. It is the real work. It is the specific place where the brain will tell you to stop. Because there is no novelty there, because there may be discomfort there. And continuing past that point is the actual behavior that determines financial outcomes. Not the method, not the app, not the resolution made at the beginning of the month. The moment of continuing when the brain says there's nothing interesting here. The perfect system fallacy is not a flaw in human character. It is a feature of human cognition applied to an environment it was never designed for. The dopamine system evolved to reward discovery, novelty, and the detection of resources. In that environment, finding a better path to water was survival critical. Refining the same path every day was not a cognitive priority. Personal finance is the opposite problem. It is a problem of repetition, of making the same small decisions correctly month after month, with no novelty, no discovery, no new signal, only the grind of maintenance against a backdrop of structural economic pressure that makes the numbers difficult regardless of how elegantly the system is designed. The brain was not built for this. The brain is doing exactly what it should do in the environment it was shaped for. The brain is wrong for the task, which is in the end a different thing than you being wrong for the task. Dana closes her phone at 1:23 in the morning. The anti-budget video is still open in another tab. What's also open, in a tab she hasn't touched tonight, is her actual banking app. The next time you feel the pull toward a new method, that pull has a name now. It's the reward prediction error from a discovery your brain has already counted as progress. The moment nothing interesting is happening, spreadsheet open, transactions in front of you number worse than expected, that's the only place the fallacy ends. Not the perfect system, the imperfect action.